She walked away from the billionaire CEO with twins, but destiny brought them back years later. I have 2 children you've never met. Those words shattered Mason Blake's world as he stood frozen, staring at the woman he'd walked away from a decade ago. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers, crashing to the marble floor of the Royal Design Gala. "That's not possible," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the sudden silence in the room. "Nearly a decade," Nora Ellis replied, her eyes never leaving his. "Twins. A boy and a girl. They have your eyes, your smile, even your stubborn determination." Mason's heart hammered against his ribs. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried." Her voice cracked slightly, the first sign of emotion breaking through her composed exterior. "I called repeatedly." "Mason, you never answered. You were too busy changing the world to notice you'd changed mine forever. Can you imagine discovering you've been a father for years without knowing it? To realize that while you were building an empire, someone else was raising your children?" Rain pounded against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the grand ballroom at the Archer Hotel, each drop racing down the glass like tears. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the crowd of tuxedos and evening gowns. At the center stood Mason Blake, founder and CEO of Blake Architectural Innovations. His tailored black suit, a stark contrast to the champagne flute, glittering in his hand. "To a decade of excellence," he announced, his deep voice carrying across the hushed room. "Since the Tokyo International Tower changed the skyline forever. Years of pushing boundaries and defying expectations." Applause rippled through the crowd. Board members nodded in approval. Industry rivals raised their glasses in reluctant respect. Mason Blake had accomplished what most architects only dreamed of: global recognition, unprecedented wealth, and a portfolio that had redefined modern architecture. "They say success requires sacrifice," he continued, a practiced smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Tonight proves that every sacrifice was worth it." But was it really? What if the empire you built is nothing compared to the home you lost? As the crowd raised their glasses, a movement at the back caught his attention. A woman in a simple navy dress stood apart from the glittering crowd, her blonde hair swept into an elegant knot. Something about her silhouette, the way she held herself, sent a jolt of recognition through him. It couldn't be. Their eyes met across the room, and the world around him blurred. Years vanished in an instant. The champagne in his hand suddenly felt too heavy, the air too thin. She moved toward him with quiet determination, navigating through the crowd until she stood just feet away, close enough that he could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes that hadn't been there before, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of lavender that had once been as familiar as his own heartbeat. "Nora," he whispered, her name foreign yet achingly familiar on his tongue. "Hello, Mason." Her voice was steady, controlled. "Congratulations on your decade of success." He searched for the right words, but found none. "How do you greet the woman whose heart you shattered? The woman who had once believed in your dreams more than you did yourself? What are you doing here?" He finally managed, aware of curious glances from nearby guests. "I wasn't planning to approach you," she said quietly. "I'm here with the Riverdale Arts Foundation. We received a grant from your company's charitable arm." A small, humorless smile touched her lips. "Ironic, isn't it?" Before he could respond, she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "You said you couldn't give me a family," she said, each word precise and cutting. "So tell me, Mason, how do you explain 2 children with your eyes?" The champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Conversations halted, heads turned, but Mason heard nothing except the roaring in his ears. "What did you just say?" His voice was barely audible. "Twins," Nora replied, her composure never wavering. "A boy and a girl. They're 9 years old." 9 years. The math was undeniable. "That's not possible," he said, even as his mind raced through the implications. "You would have told me." "I tried." Something flashed in her eyes. Pain, perhaps, or anger long suppressed. "I called repeatedly." The room seemed to tilt beneath his feet. Children, his children, living, breathing extensions of himself that he'd never known existed. "I need to see them," he said, the words escaping before he could consider their weight. Nora studied him, as if measuring his worth. "They're not an acquisition, Mason. You can't just decide you want them and make it happen." "Please," he said, the word unfamiliar in his mouth. When was the last time he'd begged for anything? She reached into her clutch and withdrew a business card, placing it in his hand. "Riverdale Community Arts Center. I'm the director now." Her fingers brushed his, sending an electric current up his arm. "Think carefully about what you want, Mason. Because this time, it's not just my heart at stake." As she turned to leave, he caught her wrist. "Their names," he said hoarsely. "Tell me their names." Something softened in her expression. "Noah and Cora," she said quietly. "They're extraordinary, Mason. Everything you and I could have been." Then she was gone, disappearing into the crowd as quickly as she had appeared, leaving him standing amid broken glass and shattered certainties. The version of himself he'd carefully constructed over the years, the visionary, the success story, the man who had sacrificed personal happiness for professional greatness, crumbled around him. In its place stood a stranger, a father who had never held his children, a man who had built monuments while remaining blind to the living legacy of his own blood. Picture yourself facing the past you thought you buried, and realizing it had been growing without you. That's the devastating reality Mason Blake confronted when the woman he abandoned revealed the truth. While he was building an empire, she was raising their twins alone. He built skyscrapers that touched the clouds, but forgot the people who built his heart. Now, standing amid the wreckage of his perfect life, Mason must confront the hardest question of all. What if the empire you built is nothing compared to the home you lost? Wait before you scroll. Who's watching this and hasn't subscribed yet? Don't just watch heartbreak unfold. Be part of a community that reminds you why love still matters. Tap like if you believe some stories are written by destiny itself. Comment what you'd do if this happened to you. And subscribe right now to Mr. Sterling's Secrets of Love, so you don't miss the stories that restore faith in family. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen curtains of the modest two-story house on Maple Street, casting dappled light across the breakfast table where Nora Ellis sat reviewing grant proposals. Her blonde hair was shorter now, practical for a woman who juggled too many responsibilities to worry about styling. Fine lines had begun to appear at the corners of her eyes, evidence of both laughter and tears over the years. "Mom, have you seen my blue folder? The one with all my sketches?" Noah's voice called from upstairs, followed by the sound of drawers opening and closing. "Check under your bed," Nora replied without looking up. "That's where it was last time." "Found it," came the triumphant response. Moments later, thundering footsteps announced the arrival of both children. Noah entered first, his dark hair falling across his forehead in a way that made Nora's heart catch so like his father's. He was already showing signs of the man he would become. Thoughtful, meticulous, with an eye for detail that manifested in his architectural sketches. Cora followed, her energy filling the room before she did. Where Noah was quiet contemplation, Cora was bold action. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, her knees perpetually scraped from climbing trees and racing bikes. "Mom, can we stop at the bookstore after school? Mrs. Peterson said we should read more about famous buildings if we want to be in the advanced art program," Cora said, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "And I need new sketching pencils," Noah added quietly. "The ones I have are too dull for detailed work." Nora smiled at her children, marveling as she often did at how two people who shared identical birthdays could be so different. Yet in both their faces, she saw echoes of the man who had given them life, but never known them. The determined set of Noah's jaw, the way Cora's eyes crinkled when she laughed. "We'll see," she said, checking her watch. "I have a meeting with potential donors this afternoon, but if it wraps up early, we can make a quick stop." "Is it about the expansion?" Noah asked, his interest in the art center's architectural plans evident. "Yes, and about the summer program funding." Nora gathered her papers into a neat stack. "Now finish your breakfast. Miss Patty will be here soon to take you to school." As the twins ate, Nora allowed herself a moment to simply watch them. 9 years of birthday candles and Christmas mornings. 9 years of nightmares soothed and scraped knees bandaged. 9 years of building a life that was full and meaningful, even if it wasn't the one she had once imagined. After Mason had left, after she had realized her calls would never be returned, Nora had made a choice. She would not be defined by abandonment. She would not raise her children in the shadow of rejection. Instead, she had moved to Riverdale, a small town with a struggling arts community, and poured her energy into creating something beautiful. The Riverdale Community Arts Center had been little more than a dilapidated building when she arrived. Now it housed classes in everything from pottery to digital design, provided after-school programs for local children, and served as the cultural heart of the community. Like her life, it was a testament to what could be built from broken pieces. "Mom, you're doing the staring thing again," Cora said, breaking into her thoughts. Nora blinked, smiling. "Just thinking how lucky I am to have you two." "Even when I forget to put my dirty socks in the hamper?" Cora asked with a grin. "Even then," Nora assured her, ruffling her hair. After the twins left for school, Nora allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. Her gaze drifted to the small shelf above the kitchen desk, where a weathered magazine sat. She kept it not for the feature on Mason's Tokyo Tower, though that was there, his confident smile beaming from the cover, but for what was tucked inside, a sonogram image of 2 tiny forms, the first picture of her children. She had never told the twins the full truth about their father. They knew he was an architect who had chosen his career over family. They knew he designed famous buildings around the world, but they didn't know that he had no idea they existed. That omission weighed on Nora more with each passing year, especially as their questions became more specific. "Did Dad ever draw pictures with me?" Noah had asked once. "Does he know I won the science fair?" Cora had wondered another time. Each question was a small knife to Nora's heart. She answered as honestly as she could, without revealing the complete truth. "He missed so many wonderful things about you both." The twins had built their own narrative about their absent father, a brilliant but distant figure whose work kept him traveling the world. It was a fiction Nora had allowed, perhaps selfishly, to protect them from feeling unwanted. But lately, as they grew more curious, Nora had begun to question her decision. Did they deserve to know the whole truth? Did Mason? Her phone chimed with a text from Caleb Rhodes, her closest friend and the Arts Center's program coordinator. "Donor meeting moved up to 11. Westridge Development Rep will be there too. Wear your battle armor." Nora sighed. Westridge Development had been courting the town council for months, proposing a luxury complex that would transform Riverdale's modest downtown. While it promised economic growth, many residents feared it would destroy the town's character and price out longtime community members. She texted back, "On my way. Coffee first." Every day, the twins grew more into themselves, developing talents that sometimes startled her with their familiarity. Noah's methodical approach to his drawings, Cora's fearless creativity, and problem-solving. They were the living embodiment of what she and Mason might have created together, not just in their physical features, but in the beautiful fusion of their parents' strengths. Each evening, Nora would return home to help with homework, prepare dinner, and tuck her children into bed. Their nighttime routine had one constant element: the stories. "Tell us about when you were designing buildings," Noah would request, snuggled under his comforter. "Tell us about the biggest one you ever worked on," Cora would add. And Nora would weave tales from her years as a promising young architect, working alongside Mason before he became famous. She would describe the excitement of seeing a design come to life, the challenges of balancing beauty with function, the satisfaction of creating spaces where people could live and dream. What she never told them was how she had abandoned her own promising career when pregnancy made her too sick to work, how she had reinvented herself out of necessity rather than choice. "Your father built cities," she would tell them as she kissed them goodnight. "But I built you." It was her way of reframing their story not as abandonment, but as different paths to creation. Mason created with steel and glass. she created with love and patience and daily sacrifice. For 9 years, this narrative had sustained them. For 9 years, Nora had convinced herself it was enough. Until last week, when she had received the invitation to the Royal Design Gala. Until she had seen his name on the guest list and realized that fate was finally forcing her hand. Now, as she locked the front door and headed to her meeting, Nora wondered if she had made the right choice in confronting him. The shock in his eyes had been genuine. He truly hadn't known. But what did that change? Would knowing about the twins suddenly transform him into someone capable of being a father? And more importantly, was she ready to share the precious world she had built with the man who had once shattered her heart? As she drove through the tree-lined streets of Riverdale, past the community garden she had helped establish, and the playground where her children spent summer afternoons, Nora realized that the life she had created wasn't just a consolation prize. It was rich and meaningful, filled with purpose and love. Whatever Mason decided to do with the information she had given him, she would protect this life and her children with everything she had. To every parent, every dreamer, every heart still healing, if you're still watching without subscribing, why? Don't let the stories that remind you of your own strength vanish when you scroll. Tap. Like if this mother's strength inspires you. Share this story with someone raising children alone and comment, "I believe in miracles." Then subscribe before the next chapter makes your heart ache in the best way. The elevator ascended silently to the penthouse floor of The Archer. Inside, Mason Blake loosened his tie, the weight of the evening's revelation pressing against his chest like a stone. Children. He had children. The doors opened directly into his penthouse, a sprawling space of minimalist luxury overlooking Central Park. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering city skyline, a view he had once considered the ultimate symbol of his success. Tonight, it felt like looking at a stranger's life. He moved to the bar and poured himself scotch, not bothering with ice. The amber liquid burned down his throat, but did nothing to dull the shock. Noah and Cora, 9 years old. His phone buzzed with messages, congratulations from colleagues, follow-up notes from potential clients. He ignored them all, moving instead to his home office, where a wall of awards and accolades chronicled his meteoric rise. The Pritzker Prize, architectural awards, magazine covers. Now they seemed hollow, meaningless compared to the title he had never claimed. Father. Mason sank into his leather chair as memories flooded back. He had met Nora Ellis over a decade ago at an architectural symposium in Chicago. She was brilliant, talented, with a fresh perspective that challenged his own. Their collaboration had evolved into romance, and for years, they had been inseparable professionally and personally, until the Tokyo opportunity came along. The chance to design what would become his signature achievement, the building that would cement his legacy. The project required total commitment, relocation to Japan for an extended period. "Come with me," he had urged Nora. "We can build something extraordinary together." But she had just been offered a partnership at her firm in New York. "I can't abandon everything I've worked for," she had argued. "Why can't we try long distance? Just for a while." The argument had escalated, revealing deeper fractures. Nora wanted stability, roots, eventually, a family. Mason wanted global recognition, innovation, freedom to pursue his vision wherever it took him. "I can't give you what you want," he had told her that rainy night in their apartment. "Not now. Maybe not ever." He had left for Tokyo the next morning. Missed calls from her in the following weeks. Voicemails he had never returned, too immersed in his work, too afraid of being pulled back into a life that felt like compromise. By the time he returned to New York months later, she was gone. He had convinced himself it was for the best, that they wanted different things, that she deserved someone who could give her the life she wanted. Never once had he imagined she was pregnant. Never once had he considered that his children were growing up without him. Mason drained his glass and moved to the window, staring out at the city he had helped shape. How many buildings bore his signature? How many skylines had he transformed? And yet he had never built the most fundamental thing of all, a family. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Blake, the board is waiting for your decision on the Riverdale project. They need an answer by morning." The Riverdale project. The urban renewal initiative that would transform the town into a luxury destination. His firm had been courting the local government for months. Riverdale, where Nora now lived, where his children were growing up. "Tell them I'll be handling the project personally," he replied, a decision forming even as he spoke. "I'll be relocating to Riverdale temporarily to oversee the initial phases." "Sir? That's unexpected. What about the Dubai Commission?" "Reassign it. This takes priority." He ended the call before she could question him further. For the first time in years, Mason Blake was making a decision that had nothing to do with architectural innovation or professional advancement. He was going to Riverdale. He was going to meet his children. The following morning, Mason's driver navigated through Manhattan traffic toward the helipad. As the city fell away beneath them, Mason reviewed what little information his team had gathered about Riverdale overnight. Population, just under 15,000. Economy, primarily small businesses and tourism, with a growing arts community. And at the center of that community, the Riverdale Arts Center, directed by Nora Ellis. The helicopter landed at a small regional airport, where another car waited. As they drove through tree-lined streets and past well-maintained historic buildings, Mason began to understand why the town had caught his development team's attention. It had charm, character qualities, that made it ripe for upscale transformation. "Stop here," he instructed, as they approached the town square. "I'll walk the rest of the way." He needed to see the place through unfiltered eyes, needed to understand the community his children called home. Riverdale's downtown was modest but vibrant. A bookstore with reading nooks visible through the windows. A cafe where patrons lingered over coffee. A hardware store that looked like it had been in business for generations. And at the far end of the square, a Victorian-era building with a freshly painted sign. Riverdale Community Arts Center. Mason paused across the street, studying the building. It needed work. The roof appeared to be in poor repair, and one of the ornate cornices was crumbling. But there was undeniable beauty in its proportions. A group of children spilled out the front doors, laughing and chattering. Mason's heart rate accelerated. Could his children be among them? Before he could cross the street, his phone rang. "The town council has agreed to meet with you tomorrow morning," his assistant informed him. "I've arranged accommodations at the Riverdale Inn." "Thank you, Jessica." "And the other matter?" "Noah and Cora Ellis, age 9. They attend Riverdale Elementary School. Noah is in the gifted program for mathematics and design. Cora excels in science and performing arts. Both participate in after-school programs at the Arts Center." Mason's throat tightened. "Thank you." He ended the call and continued staring at the Arts Center, imagining his children inside, creating, learning, growing, all without him. The weight of missed moments pressed down on him. First words, first steps, first days of school, birthdays, and holidays. Years of absence couldn't be erased with a simple apology. He knew that. But he had to try. Had to find a way to be part of their lives, even if it meant dismantling everything he thought he wanted. As rain began to fall, Mason turned and walked toward the Riverdale Inn. Tomorrow would bring the first test of his resolve, facing the town council with a development proposal that might very well be opposed by the mother of his children. For the first time in his career, Mason Blake had no blueprint to follow, no clear vision of the structure he was trying to build, only the certainty that whatever emerged would define the rest of his life. The town hall was a short walk from the inn, a stately brick building with white columns. Inside, the council chambers were already filled with residents when Mason arrived. He recognized the mayor and council members from his research, but his eyes searched for only one face. She wasn't there. The meeting proceeded with introductions. When it was Mason's turn to speak, he abandoned his prepared remarks and instead presented his revised vision, one that would complement, rather than overwhelm, Riverdale's existing community. "Mr. Blake," the mayor said when he had finished, This is quite different from what your company initially proposed." "Yes," Mason acknowledged. "After seeing your town firsthand, I realized our original approach was misguided. Riverdale doesn't need transformation. It needs thoughtful enhancement." And a murmur ran through the audience, surprise, cautious approval. "Well," the mayor continued, "we'll need time to review these new plans. And of course, we'll want input from community stakeholders. Speaking of which, I believe our Arts Center director had concerns about the original proposal. Miss Ellis, would you like to address the council?" Mason's head snapped up as a familiar figure rose from a seat near the back. How had he missed her? Nora moved to the podium with the same quiet confidence he remembered. Her once long blonde hair now fell in a practical bob. The designer clothes she had favored were replaced by a simple blouse and tailored pants. But her eyes, those expressive blue eyes, were exactly the same, if more guarded now. "Thank you, Mayor Pierce." Her voice was steady, professional. "As director of the Riverdale Arts Center, my primary concern is ensuring that any development preserves our community's cultural spaces and remains accessible to all residents, not just those who can afford luxury accommodations." She proceeded to outline specific concerns. Not once did she acknowledge Mason directly, though he felt her awareness of him like a physical force. "I'd be happy to address those concerns," Mason said when she had finished, rising from his seat. Their eyes met across the chamber, a current of unspoken history passing between them. "Perhaps we could arrange a meeting at the Arts Center? I'd like to see firsthand the programs that might be impacted." A flash of wariness crossed Nora's face before her professional mask returned. "My assistant can arrange that," she replied coolly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a class to teach." She gathered her papers and left without another glance, leaving Mason standing there, acutely aware of the opportunity slipping away. The meeting concluded shortly after, with the council agreeing to review the revised proposal. As Mason collected his materials, the mayor approached him. "That was quite a turnaround from your company's original pitch, Mr. Blake," he said. "I must say, I'm impressed." "Thank you, Mayor Pierce. I believe in adapting to the needs of each community." "Well, you've certainly done that." The mayor lowered his voice slightly, though I couldn't help noticing some tension between you and Miss Ellis. "I hope that won't complicate matters." Mason maintained his professional smile. "Not at all. Miss Ellis and I have crossed paths professionally in the past. Nothing that will affect the project." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it was far from the whole truth. As he left the town hall, Mason checked his watch. If Nora was teaching a class now, it would be at the Arts Center. Before he could second-guess himself, he was walking across the town square. The rain had stopped, leaving puddles that reflected the clearing sky. By the time he reached the Arts Center steps, the sun had emerged. A sign on the door read, "Community Pottery Class in progress. Please enter quietly." Mason pushed the door open, stepping into a lobby decorated with local artwork. A teenage volunteer sat at the reception desk. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Miss Ellis," Mason replied. "I understand she's teaching a class?" "In the main studio," the girl pointed down a hallway. "But she doesn't like to be interrupted during class." "I'll wait then." The teenager returned to her phone, leaving Mason to wander the lobby. He studied the artwork on display: paintings, sculptures, mixed media pieces created by community members. One wall featured a children's art exhibition. His heart nearly stopped when he saw them. Noah Ellis, age 9, beneath a meticulously detailed drawing of a futuristic building, and Cora Ellis, age 9, under a vibrant watercolor landscape. His children's creations, his children's talents, displayed for all to see, while he, their father, was seeing them for the first time. The sound of laughter drew his attention to a side room where the door stood ajar. Inside, a group of children were working on a mural, guided by an elderly woman with paint-spattered hands. And among them, Mason's breath caught, were 2 dark-haired children who could only be his. The boy Noah was carefully adding detail to a section of the mural, his concentration evident. The girl Cora was more animated, gesturing enthusiastically as she explained something to her companions. Mason stood transfixed, drinking in every detail. Noah had his jawline, his focused intensity. Cora had his eyes, his expressive hands. Both had Nora's smile, her quiet confidence. They were beautiful, perfect, and completely unknown to him. They're not part of the tour. Nora's voice behind him was soft but firm. Mason turned to find her standing in the hallway, arms crossed. "I wasn't," he began, then stopped. What could he say? "They're remarkable," he said instead, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes, they are." Nora glanced toward the mural room, then back to Mason. "This isn't the place for this conversation." "Then where? When? You can't just tell me I have children and then expect me to walk away. Can't I?" A flash of anger broke through her composed exterior. "Isn't that exactly what you did to me?" The accusation hit him like a physical blow. "I didn't know you were pregnant. Would it have mattered if you did?" The question hung between them, unanswerable. Before Mason could respond, the door to the mural room opened fully, and the children began filing out, chattering excitedly. Noah and Cora emerged last, deep in conversation with each other. "Mom!" Cora spotted Nora and bounded over, her energy palpable. "Miss Rose said our mural might be displayed at the summer festival. Isn't that amazing?" "It certainly is," Nora replied, her entire demeanor softening. "You've both worked very hard on it." Noah approached more slowly, his observant gaze taking in the stranger standing with his mother. "Who's this?" he asked. Nora's eyes met Mason's, a silent warning in their depths. "This is Mr. Blake," she said carefully. "He's an architect, working on a development project in town." "An architect?" Noah's interest visibly peaked. "Like designing buildings?" "Yes," Mason managed. "Exactly like that." "I want to be an architect," Noah said, his reserve melting slightly. "I've been studying different styles. Which one do you like best?" The simple question, so innocent, so profound, nearly undid Mason completely. His son was asking about architecture. His son shared his passion. "I believe every style has its place," he answered, fighting to keep his voice even. "But I've always been drawn to the intersection of form and function, where beauty and purpose become inseparable." Noah nodded seriously, as if considering this perspective. "I like buildings that tell stories," he said. "Like the old train station that's now the library. You can still see where the tracks used to be." "That's a very insightful observation," Mason replied, unable to hide his smile. "The best architecture always preserves history while creating something new." "Noah?" "Cora," Nora interrupted gently. "Miss Patty is waiting to take you home. I'll be there in time for dinner." "I am—" "But Mom," Cora protested. "I wanted to show you my science project. I'll look at it tonight, I promise." Nora's tone was firm but loving. "Now go on, both of you." With reluctant nods, the twins gathered their backpacks. As they headed toward the door, Noah glanced back at Mason. "Are you going to build something in Riverdale, Mr. Blake?" "I hope so," Mason replied, meaning far more than buildings. Have you ever watched a stranger become family right before your eyes? If this moment hit you, tap like. If you're still watching without subscribing, you're missing stories that change lives. Hit subscribe to Mr. Sterling's Secrets of Love now. And comment, "Second chances," if you believe people can change. After the children had gone, silence fell between the adults. Nora moved toward her office, gesturing for Mason to follow. Once inside, she closed the door and turned to face him. "That was inappropriate," she said quietly. "You can't just show up here without warning." "I needed to see them." Mason remained standing, too restless to sit. "They're my children, Nora." "Biologically, yes." She leaned against her desk, arms crossed. "But in every way that matters, every day, every decision, every moment of their lives, they've been mine alone." "Because you never told me about them." "I tried." The words emerged sharper than before. "I called repeatedly. I left messages explaining that we needed to talk. That it was urgent. You never responded. I was in Tokyo. Don't. Nora held up a hand. Don't make excuses. You chose your path. I respected that choice and built a life without you. Mason ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she remembered well. What do you want me to say? That I made a mistake? I did, the biggest of my life, but I can't change the past. I can only try to be part of their future. And how exactly do you envision that working? Nora's voice was controlled, but he could hear the tension beneath. You'll fly in for weekend visits between designing projects around the world? They need stability, Mason. Not a father who appears and disappears at will. I'm not suggesting weekend visits. The words came before he had fully formed the thought. I'm relocating to Riverdale. Temporarily, at least. To oversee the Westridge project. Surprise flickered across Nora's face. The project my arts center is actively opposing. The project I've completely redesigned based on community input, he countered, including your concerns about accessibility and preservation. How convenient. Skepticism colored her tone. You show up in town, discover you have children, and suddenly you're the champion of small-town preservation. It's not like that. But wasn't it? Hadn't he revised the entire proposal after learning about Noah and Cora? The original plan was flawed. I see that now. And what happens when this project is complete? When you've satisfied your curiosity about the children you never knew? Will you simply return to your empire and your penthouse? The question struck at the heart of his uncertainty. What was he really offering? What could he promise? I don't know, he admitted finally. I don't have all the answers, Nora. But I know I want to be part of their lives. I want to know them. I want them to know me. Nora studied him, her expression softening slightly. They've asked about you over the years. I've never lied, but I haven't told them the whole truth either. They believe you're aware of their existence, but too busy with your career to be involved. The revelation was both relief and knife twist. At least they knew of him. But the image they had of a father who knew about them, but chose not to be present, was perhaps worse than the truth. What have you told them about why we separated? He asked. That we wanted different things, that you needed freedom to pursue your vision, and I needed roots. She shrugged slightly. It's not untrue. And now? What will you tell them now? Nora sighed, the weight of the decision evident. I don't know yet. They're 9, Mason. Old enough to understand some complexities, but young enough to be deeply hurt by rejection. I won't reject them, he said firmly. Whatever happens between you and me, whatever complications arise, I want to be their father. If you'll let me. It's not that simple. She moved to the window, looking out at the town square. They have lives here, friends, activities, routines. They're thriving. I won't disrupt that for your convenience. Then set the terms, Mason said, stepping closer. Tell me how to do this right. I'll follow your lead. Nora turned back to him, surprise evident. When had Mason Blake ever offered to follow anyone's lead? If, and it's a big if I agree to introduce you properly, it would be on my terms, she said slowly. No grand gestures, no expensive gifts, no promises you can't keep. We start small, with supervised visits. They set the pace. Agreed. His response was immediate. And this stays separate from the Westridge project. Whatever happens professionally doesn't affect your relationship with them. Of course. And one more thing. Her gaze was steady, unflinching. You need to be certain, Mason. Really certain. Because if you walk into their lives and then walk out again when it gets difficult or inconvenient, I will never forgive you. And neither will they. The weight of her words settled over him. She wasn't just protecting her children, she was protecting herself from being hurt again. And he couldn't blame her. I'm certain, he said quietly. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Nora held his gaze for a long moment, as if searching for any hint of doubt or deception. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she finally nodded. All right, she said. We'll start slowly. Dinner at my house. This weekend. I'll tell them the truth. That you didn't know about them until now. That you want to be part of their lives. But Mason, she paused, her voice softening. They're going to have questions. Hard questions. And they might not be ready to accept you right away. I understand. Do you? She studied him carefully. Because this isn't like your development projects. You can't just redesign the approach when things get difficult. These are real children with real feelings. My children. Our children, Mason corrected gently. Something flickered in Nora's eyes, pain perhaps, or the ghost of what they'd once had. Yes, she said finally. Our children. The rest of the week passed in a blur of nervous anticipation for Mason. He found himself thinking about Noah and Cora, constantly wondering what they liked, what they were afraid of, whether they would accept him. He had faced boardrooms full of skeptical investors, presented to hostile city councils, negotiated with difficult contractors. But nothing had prepared him for the terror of meeting his own children. Saturday arrived with crisp autumn weather. Mason stood on the porch of Nora's house, a modest two-story colonial with a well-tended garden. In his hands, he held nothing. No gifts, no bribes, just himself, as Nora had instructed. The door opened before he could knock. Nora stood there, her expression carefully neutral. They know you're coming, she said quietly. I explained everything last night. They had questions. What kind of questions? Why you never contacted us? Whether you wanted them? Whether you're going to leave again? Her voice was matter of fact, but he could hear the emotion beneath. I answered as honestly as I could. Mason's chest tightened. What did you tell them? The truth. That you didn't know they existed. That when you found out, you immediately wanted to meet them. That you're trying to be the father they deserve. Whether you succeed is up to you. She stepped aside, allowing him to enter. The house was warm and inviting, filled with the kind of lived-in comfort that spoke of home rather than showpiece. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator. Backpacks hung by the door. A Lego city sprawled across the coffee table. This was what he had sacrificed. This was what he had missed. They're in the living room, Nora said, leading the way. Noah and Cora sat on the couch, unusually still and quiet. Gone was Cora's boundless energy, replaced by wariness. Noah's expression was carefully blank, his posture defensive. Noah, Cora, Nora said gently, you remember Mr. Blake from the Arts Center. He's not Mr. Blake, Cora said, her voice small. He's our dad. The word hit Mason like a physical force. Dad. He was their dad. Not just biologically, but in their eyes, in their understanding of the world. The weight of it was crushing and exhilarating all at once. Yes, Mason managed, his voice rough. I'm your dad, and I know this is confusing and probably scary, but I want you to know that I didn't know about you until very recently. If I had known, I would have been here. I would have been part of your lives. From the beginning, Noah studied him with those thoughtful eyes so like his own. Mom said you were in another country when she tried to tell you. I was, Mason confirmed. In Japan, working on a building project. I was so focused on my work that I didn't return her calls. That was my mistake. A huge mistake. And I'm sorry. Are you going to stay in Riverdale? Cora asked, her directness reminding him of Nora. For now, yes. I'm working on a project here, but even after that's done, I want to be part of your lives, if you'll let me. What if we don't want you in our lives? Noah's question was quiet but sharp. The words cut deep, but Mason forced himself to meet his son's gaze. Then, I'll respect that. I can't force you to accept me. All I can do is show up and hope that, over time, you'll give me a chance. Silence fell over the room. Nora stood by the doorway, her expression unreadable. The twins exchanged a glance, having one of those silent conversations that siblings share. Finally, Cora spoke. Mom says you're an architect, like you design really famous buildings. Yes, Mason replied, grateful for the neutral topic. I've designed buildings in several countries. Noah wants to be an architect, Cora continued. He's always drawing buildings and making models. I saw your drawing at the art center, Mason said, looking at Noah. The futuristic building. It was incredibly detailed. Noah's reserve cracked slightly. You really think so? I do. The proportions were excellent, and your sense of perspective was very advanced for your age. Mason paused, then added carefully, if you ever want to talk about architecture, or if you want to see some of my work, I'd be happy to share it with you. What's the tallest building you've ever designed? Noah asked, his curiosity overcoming his wariness. The Tokyo International Tower. It's over 80 stories tall. Wow. Noah's eyes widened. What's it like being that high up? Incredible, Mason said, smiling. You can see the entire city. But you know what? The height isn't what makes me proud. It's the fact that people work and live and create memories in that space. That's what architecture is really about. Creating spaces for life to happen. Noah nodded slowly, processing this. Cora, meanwhile, had been studying Mason with the intensity of a scientist examining a specimen. You have the same eyebrows as Noah, she announced suddenly, and the same hands. It's weird. Despite the tension, Nora laughed softly. Yes. Well, that's how genetics work. Can you cook? Cora asked Mason, changing topics with the randomness of childhood. Not well, Mason admitted. I usually eat out or order in. Mom's an amazing cook, Cora said proudly. I remember, Mason said, glancing at Nora. Their eyes met, a moment of shared history passing between them. Dinner will be ready soon, Nora said, breaking the moment. Why don't you all wash up? The meal was initially awkward, filled with careful conversation and long pauses. But gradually, as the children relaxed, the atmosphere warmed. Noah asked more questions about architecture. Cora demonstrated her knowledge of marine biology, her current obsession. Mason listened, fascinated, learning about his children through their passions and quirks. After dinner, Noah hesitantly asked if Mason wanted to see his architecture portfolio. They spent an hour in Noah's room, poring over drawings and discussing design principles. Mason offered suggestions but mostly listened, letting his son lead the conversation. When it was time for Mason to leave, the twins were notably less hostile than they had been when he arrived. Can you come back? Cora asked suddenly. Mom's making her famous pancakes tomorrow morning. Mason looked at Nora, who nodded slightly. I'd like that, he said. If it's okay with your mom and with both of you. It's okay, Noah said quietly. I mean, you're our dad. We should probably get to know you. It wasn't a declaration of love or acceptance, but it was a start. And for Mason, it was everything. That's the moment everything changed. Did you feel it? Comment, proud parent. If this resonates, share with someone raising kids solo. And subscribe if you believe in second chances. Don't scroll past you're watching something beautiful begin. Over the following weeks, Mason became a regular presence in his children's lives. He attended Noah's school presentation on sustainable architecture. He cheered from the audience at Cora's science fair, where her project on ocean acidification won first place. He helped with homework, though math had evolved since his school days and left him slightly baffled. Slowly, carefully, trust began to build. One evening, as Mason was leaving after dinner, Noah stopped him at the door. Dad? The word was tentative, testing. Mason's heart stopped. It was the first time Noah had called him that. Yes? Would you want to help me with my model for the regional architecture competition? It's due in a month, and I'm kind of stuck on the structural engineering part. I would love to, Mason replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Cool. Noah smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face. Thanks, Dad. After Noah had gone back inside, Mason stood on the porch, overwhelmed by emotion. It was such a small thing, a request for help with a school project. but it represented everything. Trust, acceptance, the beginning of a real relationship. He's starting to let you in. Nora had stepped out onto the porch, wrapping her sweater around herself against the evening chill. It means everything to me, Mason said quietly. I can see that. Nora leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the quiet street. You're doing better than I expected. Honestly, I thought you'd get overwhelmed or frustrated with the mundane parts of parenting. Are you kidding? The mundane parts are. Mason searched for words. They're everything I missed, everything I didn't know I wanted. Nora turned to study him. You've changed, Mason. Or maybe I just never really knew you as well as I thought I did. I've changed, he confirmed. Or maybe I'm finally becoming who I was supposed to be all along. A comfortable silence fell between them, the kind that only exists between people who have shared history. The West Ridge Project, Nora said eventually. The council approved your revised plans, with some modifications based on community input. I know. I'm glad. It's the right approach for Riverdale. You really mean that, don't you? She sounded surprised. A few months ago, you would have bulldozed right through any opposition. A few months ago, I didn't have children in Riverdale, Mason replied. I didn't understand what community really meant. What roots really meant. Nora nodded slowly. Well, the Arts Center will be working closely with your team on the historical preservation aspects, so I guess we'll be seeing a lot of each other professionally. Is that going to be a problem? I don't know yet, she said honestly. It's complicated, Mason. Watching you with the kids, seeing you actually show up and be present, it reminds me of why I fell in love with you in the first place. But it also reminds me of how much it hurt when you left. I'm sorry, Nora. For all of it. For not being there when you needed me. For missing the first 9 years of their lives. For breaking your heart. I know you are. She wrapped her arms around herself. But apologies don't erase the past. They don't guarantee the future. What do you want from me? I don't know, she admitted. I just know that I need you to keep showing up. For them, definitely. But also, she trailed off, leaving the thought unfinished. Mason wanted to reach for her, to pull her into his arms, the way he once would have without thinking. But too much had changed. Too much time had passed. Trust, once broken, couldn't be rebuilt overnight. I'll keep showing up, he promised, for as long as you'll let me. The regional science fair was held on a Saturday at the community college. Mason arrived early, nervous energy thrumming through him. Cora's project was displayed in the junior division, a detailed examination of how ocean acidification affects marine ecosystems. Noah was already there with Nora, helping his sister make last-minute adjustments to her display. Dad! Cora waved enthusiastically when she spotted him. The word came naturally now. Without hesitation. You made it! I wouldn't miss it, Mason replied, smiling. Your project looks amazing. Thanks. I've been working on it for months. Did you know that the ocean has absorbed about 30% of the carbon dioxide we've released into the atmosphere? It's making the water more acidic, which is really bad for coral reefs and shellfish. Her passion was infectious. Mason listened as she explained her research methodology, her experiment design, her conclusions. This was his daughter, brilliant, curious, determined to understand and change the world. When the judging began, Mason stood with Nora and Noah, watching as Cora confidently answered the judges' questions. She's incredible, Mason said softly. She gets that determination from you, Nora replied. That absolute certainty that she can tackle any challenge. And the compassion from you. The desire to make a difference. Nora glanced at him, something softening in her expression. We made pretty amazing kids, didn't we? We did. When Cora was announced as the first-place winner in her division, she shrieked with joy and immediately ran to hug all three of them, Nora, then Noah, then Mason. Being included in that celebration, being part of that moment of triumph, meant more to Mason than any award or recognition he had ever received. Afterward, they went out for ice cream, a family tradition Nora had established years ago. Mason sat in the booth, listening to Cora recount every detail of the competition. Watching Noah tease his sister with gentle affection. seeing Nora smile with maternal pride. This was what he had been missing. Not just moments with his children, but belonging to something larger than himself. Being part of a family. When broken things start healing, it's messy and beautiful. Who's still here but hasn't subscribed? Don't let stories like this disappear. Like, comment healing, and subscribe right now. Not everything was smooth sailing. There were difficult moments. Times when the weight of 9 years of absence couldn't be glossed over with good intentions. One afternoon, Mason arrived to pick up the twins for their planned visit to his office. He had arranged for them to see architectural models and meet some of his team members who were working on the Riverdale project. But when he arrived, only Noah was ready. Cora was in her room. Door closed. She's upset, Nora explained quietly. Her friend Emily's father is coaching their soccer team, and there's a father-daughter tournament coming up. It brought up some feelings. Mason's stomach sank. Can I talk to her? Nora hesitated, then nodded. Room at the top of the stairs. But Mason, tread carefully. She's processing a lot. He climbed the stairs and knocked gently on Cora's door. Cora? It's Dad. Can I come in? Silence. Then, finally, I guess. He entered to find her sitting on her bed, arms wrapped around her knees. Her eyes were red from crying. Your mom said you're upset about the soccer tournament, Mason said, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. It's stupid, Cora muttered. It's not stupid. Tell me what you're feeling. It's just. She struggled to find words. Emily's been talking about how her dad has been practicing with her every weekend, and I realized that I've never had that. We're supposed to have a dad who does stuff like that, but we didn't. And now you're here. But you weren't there for all those other times. All those other tournaments and games and everything. The words were like daggers, each one justified, each one painful. You're right, Mason said quietly. I wasn't there, and I can't go back and change that. No matter how much I wish I could, those years are gone, and I missed so much. I missed your first steps and your first words. I missed teaching you to ride a bike and comforting you after nightmares. I missed being there when you won your first science competition or when you learned to swim. Cora was crying openly now. Why didn't you want us? Oh, sweetheart, Mason's voice cracked. I did want you. I just didn't know you existed. And I know that's hard to understand, but it's the truth. If I had known, if I had any idea that you and Noah were in the world, nothing could have kept me away. Not work, not distance, nothing. But you left, Mom. You knew she existed and you still left. The accusation hit home because it was true. He had left Nora. He had chosen his career over their relationship. I did leave your mom, Mason admitted, and that was my mistake. I thought I knew what I wanted: success, recognition, freedom to pursue my work without compromise. But I was wrong. What I really wanted was right in front of me all along, and I was too blind to see it. Cora wiped her eyes. What if you get blind again? What if you decide work is more important and you leave us too? I won't, Mason said firmly. I promise you, Cora. I'm not going anywhere. People break promises. They do, he acknowledged. But I'm asking you to give me the chance to prove that I won't break this one. I can't erase the past 9 years. I can't give you back all those moments we should have had. But I can promise to be here for every moment from now on. Every soccer tournament, every science fair, every ordinary Tuesday. I want to be your dad, Cora. Not just a name, but in every way that matters. Cora studied him, her expression uncertain. The tournament is next month. Will you? Would you practice with me? Even though Emily's dad has been coaching her for way longer? I would be honored, Mason said, his throat tight with emotion. I should warn you, though. I'm not particularly good at soccer. A small smile broke through Cora's tears. That's okay. Neither is Mom. But she always tries. Then I'll try too, as hard as I can. Cora nodded slowly. Okay. We should probably go, right? Noah's been waiting. As they headed downstairs together, Cora slipped her hand into Mason's. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. A bridge being built, trust being extended despite the hurt. Nora caught Mason's eye as they left, and he saw understanding there. This was parenthood navigating emotions, earning trust one moment at a time, showing up, even when it was hard. Noah's regional architecture competition became a focal point of their evolving relationship. Every evening after dinner, Mason would help Noah work on his model, a proposed redesign of the old train station as a modern community hub. The challenge, Noah explained as they worked, is preserving the historical character while making it functional for today. Most kids are just designing from scratch, but I wanted to do something that respects what came before. Mason's chest swelled with pride. His son understood what so many architects took years to grasp, that the best design honors history while embracing innovation. Have you thought about the interior flow? Mason asked, studying Noah's preliminary sketches. That's where I'm stuck, Noah admitted. I want it to feel open and welcoming, but I also need distinct spaces for different activities. Together they worked through the problem, Mason guiding but letting Noah make the final decisions. It reminded him of his own early days in architecture school, when his mentor had taught him to trust his instincts while learning to see structures from every angle. What was it like? Noah asked one evening as they applied delicate details to the model. Designing your first big building? Terrifying, Mason admitted, and exhilarating. The Tokyo Tower was my first major solo project. Every decision felt enormous. I second-guessed myself constantly. But you didn't give up. No, because I believed in the vision, and I had people who believed in me. He paused. Your mom was one of them. She was actually the one who convinced me to submit my proposal for that project in the first place. Noah looked up with interest. Really? Mom never told us that. She probably didn't want to give me credit, Mason said with a slight smile. But it's true. When I was convinced I wasn't ready, she reminded me that waiting for perfect confidence means never taking the leap. She told me to trust my skills and my instincts. She says stuff like that to us too, Noah said quietly. Whenever we're afraid to try something new. She's wise, your mother. Much wiser than I gave her credit for. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of easy quiet that only comes with growing familiarity. Dad? Noah's voice was tentative. Yeah? I'm glad you're here. I know it's been weird. And I know Cora and I didn't make it easy at first. But I'm glad. Mason had to pause, overcome with emotion. I'm glad too, Noah. Being your dad, being here with you and your sister, it's the best thing I've ever done. The competition took place on a Saturday at the State University. Mason drove Noah there, both of them nervous. Nora and Cora met them at the venue, making it a family outing. Noah's model was displayed alongside dozens of others, each representing hours of work and creativity. But Mason couldn't help but think his son stood out not just because he was biased, but because it demonstrated a maturity of thinking beyond his years. When Noah was called up to present to the judges, Mason held his breath. His son stood confidently, explaining his design philosophy, answering questions with thoughtfulness and precision. Afterward, as they waited for results, Cora grabbed Noah's hand. You were amazing, she said. Even if you don't win, you were the best one up there. Thanks, Cora, Noah replied, squeezing her hand. When Noah's name was called as the third-place winner in his division, the family erupted in cheers. It wasn't first place, but it was recognition, validation of Noah's talent and hard work. I'm so proud of you, Mason told Noah as they examined the certificate and ribbon. Not because you placed, but because of the work you put in, the thoughtfulness of your design, the way you presented your vision. Couldn't have done it without you, Noah said. You helped me see things I was missing. You had all the talent and vision already, Mason corrected. I just helped you trust yourself. As they left the university, Nora fell into step beside Mason. You're good at this, she said quietly. At what? Being a dad. You're really good at it. The compliment meant more than any architectural award ever had. The Westridge project moved forward, but not without complications. During a town council meeting, tensions erupted over the proposed timeline and construction methods. "This is our community," one resident argued. "We don't want years of construction disrupting our lives. The economic benefits will be substantial," countered a council member who supported the project. Mason stood to address the concerns. "I understand the worry about disruption. What if we implemented a phased approach? Complete the historical preservation and park space first, so the community sees immediate benefit. The commercial development would come later, with strict noise and traffic restrictions." Nora, representing the Arts Center, added her support. "If Mr. Priest, Blake's team is willing to prioritize community spaces first, I believe we can work together to ensure this development enhances rather than overwhelms Riverdale." Their professional collaboration was noticed. After the meeting, several council members commented on their effective partnership. "You two work well together," Mayor Pierce observed. "History between you?" "You could say that," Nora replied diplomatically. As they left the town hall together, Mason said, "Thank you for supporting the phased approach. I know you had reservations." "I still have some," Nora admitted, "but I trust that you're genuinely trying to do right by this community. That means something." "It means everything," Mason corrected. "This town is where my children are growing up. I want it to thrive, not just change." They walked across the town square together, the evening air cool and crisp. "Mason," Nora said suddenly, "can I ask you something?" "Anything. When the Westridge project is complete, what happens then? You said you were staying temporarily. Is that still the plan?" It was the question he had been asking himself for weeks. "Honestly, I don't know. I've been trying to figure out how to balance my work with being present for the kids. My firm has projects around the world that need oversight." "So you'll leave?" It wasn't a question, more an acceptance of inevitable reality. "No," Mason said firmly. "I won't leave. But I might need to travel occasionally. Not like before. Not extended absences. But I can't just abandon my responsibilities." "I'm not asking you to abandon anything," Nora said. "I'm just trying to understand what this looks like long term, for the kids' sake. They need stability." "I know. And I'm working on creating that. I've been talking to my partners about restructuring. Maybe opening a satellite office here in Riverdale, focusing on regional projects rather than international ones." Nora stopped walking, turning to face him. "You'd really do that? Give up the international prestige for a small-town practice?" "The international prestige doesn't tuck my kids into bed at night," Mason said simply. "It doesn't teach Noah about architecture or practice soccer with Cora. I've spent a decade building a career. I'd like to spend the next decade building a family." Something shifted in Nora's expression. A wall coming down, perhaps, or hope cautiously emerging. "That's a big change, Mason. Are you sure you won't resent it? Resent us for limiting your opportunities?" "The only thing I resent is the time I've already lost," he replied. "Every day I spend with Noah and Cora, every ordinary moment, it's worth more than any building I could design. They're my legacy now, not monuments of steel and glass, but two incredible human beings who are just beginning to discover who they are." Nora's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You really mean that?" Every word. They stood there in the quiet town square, the distance between them both vast and insignificant. There was history. Between them hurt and betrayal, love and loss. But there was also possibility, the chance to build something new on the foundation of what had been broken. "I should get home," Nora said finally. "The kids will be wondering where I am." "Nora," Mason said as she turned to leave, "thank you for giving me this chance, for letting me into their lives, into your life, even in this limited way. You're their father, Mason. They have a right to know you. We all do." She walked away into the gathering darkness, leaving Mason standing alone. But he didn't feel alone. For the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The father-daughter soccer tournament arrived on a bright Saturday morning. Mason was more nervous than he'd been for any professional presentation. "I'm not good at this," he reminded Cora as they warmed up on the field. "I know, Dad," she said cheerfully. "But you're here. That's what matters." They were matched against Emily and her father in the first round. Emily's dad was clearly experienced, coaching his daughter with practiced ease. But Cora didn't seem intimidated. "Just try to keep up," she told Mason with a grin. "I'll do the rest." And she did. Despite Mason's clumsy footwork and missed passes, Cora's skill and determination carried them through. When they scored their first goal, Cora's shot, finding the net after Mason's accidental deflection, they celebrated like they'd won the championship. They didn't win. They were eliminated in the semifinals by a pair who clearly played together regularly. But as they walked off the field, sweaty and laughing, Mason realized winning had never been the point. "That was fun," Cora said, still catching her breath. "We should practice more so we're better next year." Next year. The casual assumption that he would be there, that this was just the first of many tournaments, filled Mason with quiet joy. Nora and Noah had been watching from the sidelines. As Mason and Cora approached, Noah held up his phone. "I got video of that goal. It was actually pretty cool." "Let me see," Cora demanded. And the family gathered around the small screen, replaying the moment. Standing there with his children, with Nora smiling beside him, Mason experienced a profound sense of completeness. This was what he had been missing. Not just individual moments, but the accumulation of them. The building of shared history, inside jokes, family traditions. "Who wants lunch?" Nora asked. "I'm thinking that new pizza place downtown." "Yes," both twins chorused. As they walked toward the car, Cora slipped her hand into Mason's on one side and Nora's on the other, linking them together. For a moment, they were almost like a normal family. Not broken and reassembled, but whole. Still here without subscribing? This is your sign. Don't just watch beautiful moments. Be part of something that believes in redemption, forgiveness, and the families we rebuild. Like if this touched your heart, comment family and subscribe to Mr. Sterling's Secrets of Love before the next chapter changes everything. As autumn deepened into winter, something fundamental began to shift. Mason's presence became routine rather than remarkable. He attended school events and helped with homework. He learned the twins' schedules, their favorite foods, their fears and dreams. But more than that, he and Nora fell into an easy partnership. They coordinated schedules, discussed parenting decisions, supported each other through challenges. The professional boundaries they had carefully maintained began to blur. One evening, after the twins had gone to bed, Mason lingered in Nora's kitchen, helping with dishes, a domestic ritual that had become comfortable. "You don't have to stay," Nora said, though her tone suggested she didn't mind if he did. "I know, but I want to." He dried a plate, setting it in the cupboard. "Unless you want me to leave?" "No, it's nice. Having another adult around. Someone who understands the challenges." They worked in companionable silence for a moment before Nora spoke again. "Mason, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever think about what might have been? If you had returned my calls, if you had known about the pregnancy from the start?" Mason considered the question carefully. "All the time. But I try not to dwell on it because it leads nowhere productive. I can't change the past. I can only work with what is. But what do you think would have happened? Would we have stayed together? Built a life as a family?" "I'd like to think so," Mason said honestly. "But truthfully, I don't know. I was so focused on my career back then. So convinced that success required sacrifice. Maybe I would have resented being tied down. Maybe I would have been a terrible father, present physically but absent emotionally." Nora nodded slowly. "I've thought about that too, whether knowing about the babies would have really changed anything. But here's what I do know," Mason continued, turning to face her. "The man I was then isn't the man I am now. Losing those 9 years, discovering what I'd missed, it changed me fundamentally. Made me question everything I thought mattered. And what matters now? This," Mason said simply. "Being here, being part of their lives, being—" He hesitated, then continued, "being close to you again." The admission hung in the air between them. Nora's eyes widened slightly. "Mason, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I know I don't have the right. But I need you to know that being here, seeing you be an amazing mother, working alongside you, it's reminded me of everything I loved about you, everything I was too blind to appreciate." Nora set down the dish she'd been washing, her hands trembling slightly. "This is complicated. I know. The kids are just starting to trust you. If we try something and it doesn't work, I know." Mason repeated. "Which is why I'm not pushing. I'm just being honest about what I'm feeling." Nora studied him, her expression unreadable. "I spent years convincing myself I was over you, that what we had was youthful infatuation, that I'd romanticized in memory. Seeing you again, having you here, it stirred up feelings I thought I'd buried." "What kind of feelings?" "Complicated ones," she said again, but this time with a slight smile. "Anger and hurt, yes, but also possibility. Like maybe we're not who we were. Like maybe we could be something different, something better." "I'd like that," Mason said softly. "Even if it takes time, even if it's just being friends who co-parent. I want to be part of your life, Nora. However you'll have me." She moved closer, close enough that he could smell her familiar scent of lavender and vanilla. "I'm scared, Mason. Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of the kids getting hurt if this falls apart. Then we go slow. We put them first. We don't make promises we can't keep. Can you really do that? Be patient, not rush ahead with grand plans?" "I'm learning," Mason said. "They're teaching me. You're teaching me that the best things are built slowly, with care and attention, one day at a time." Nora reached out, her fingers barely touching his hand. It was the first intentionally intimate touch they'd shared since the gala. "One day at a time," she repeated softly. They stood there in the quiet kitchen, the distance between them both present and diminishing. Two people discovering that sometimes the most important structures are the ones we rebuild from ruins. The Riverdale Winter Festival transformed the town square into a wonderland of lights and celebration. Mason walked through the crowds with his family, marveling at how natural it had become, this belonging, this sense of home. The twins ran ahead to the ice skating rink, eager to show off their skills. Mason and Nora followed at a more leisurely pace. "Remember the winter we spent in Chicago?" Nora said suddenly. "When we went ice skating in Millennium Park? You fell and took me down with you," Mason recalled, smiling. "We laughed so hard we couldn't get up. Simpler times." "Maybe," Mason said. "Or maybe we just didn't appreciate them enough." They reached the rink where Noah and Cora were already gliding across the ice with varying degrees of grace. "Join us," Cora called out, waving enthusiastically. "I don't think that's a good idea," Mason called back. "I'm not great on skates." "Come on, Dad. Don't be scared." Nora laughed at his expression. "You can't say no when they dare you like that." "Fine," Mason grumbled, but he was smiling as they rented skates. On the ice, Mason was exactly as ungraceful as he'd warned. But with Cora holding one hand and Noah the other, he managed to stay upright mostly. Nora skated circles around them, elegant and confident. When had she learned to skate so well? "I took lessons a few years ago," she explained, reading his expression. "The kids were learning, and I didn't want to just watch from the sidelines." Of course she hadn't. Nora had never been content to just observe. She participated, engaged, threw herself fully into life. As the evening progressed, the festival took on a magical quality: lights, glittering, music playing, the community coming together in celebration. Mason found himself thinking that this was what he'd been searching for in all those international projects. Not recognition or innovation, but connection, belonging. Later, as they sipped hot chocolate and watched the twins attempt to build a snowman, Nora leaned against Mason's shoulder, a casual gesture that felt monumental. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what? For showing up, for staying, for being the father they deserve." "I'm trying," Mason said. "You're succeeding." They watched their children in comfortable silence, two people finding their way back to each other through the family they'd created. Spring arrived, bringing renewal to Riverdale. The Westridge project was progressing beautifully, with the community park and historical preservation elements nearly complete. Mason's firm had opened a regional office, with him at the helm, focusing on sustainable development throughout the Northeast. But more importantly, his personal life had found its rhythm. Dinners with the twins were routine, weekend activities were planned as a family, and his relationship with Nora had evolved into something neither of them had quite defined, but both recognized as significant. One Saturday evening, after the twins had gone to their rooms, Mason found himself alone with Nora on the back porch, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "I've been thinking," he said carefully, "about the future." "That sounds ominous," Nora replied, but she was smiling. "Not ominous, just important." He turned to face her fully. "These months, with you and the kids, they've been the best of my life. Getting to know Noah and Cora, being their father, it's given me purpose I didn't know I was missing. I sense a but coming, not a but, a question." He took her hands in his. "I know we've been taking things slow. I know there's history and hurt that doesn't just disappear. But I also know that I love you, Nora. I never stopped. I just forgot how to show it. And I love the family we've created, the one we built together, even when we were apart." Nora's eyes filled with tears. "Mason, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. We're not ready for that. But I am asking if you'd consider, if we could try, really try, to be a family. Not just co-parents, but partners. Together." "What does that look like?" Nora asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know exactly. We'd figure it out together. But it means I'm all in. It means Riverdale is home now. It means building a life here, with you, with the kids. It means no more choosing career over family. It means being present. Every day. For all of it." Nora pulled her hands free, and for a moment, Mason's heart sank. But she used them to cup his face, her touch gentle. "You've changed," she said softly. "Or maybe you've just become who you were always meant to be. And I've changed too. I'm not the girl who needed you to complete her life. I built a complete life on my own." "I know. And that's what makes this so perfect. We're not completing each other, we're choosing each other. Two whole people deciding to build something together." "Yes," Nora whispered. "Yes, yes, let's try. Let's see what we can build together." "But Mason, if you hurt them again, if you hurt me again." "I won't," he promised. "I swear to you, Nora. I'm here. For all of it. The good days and the hard ones. I'm not going anywhere." She leaned forward, and their lips met in a kiss that was both familiar and entirely new. A kiss that spoke of second chances and rebuilt trust, of family and future and love that had endured despite everything. When they finally pulled apart, Nora was laughing through her tears. "The kids are going to lose their minds. In a good way, in the best way. They've been asking me for months if you and I are back together. I think Cora has been planning our wedding since October." Mason laughed, pulling her close. "One step at a time. One step at a time," she agreed, resting her head against his chest. They stood there on the porch as the stars emerged overhead, two people who had taken a long, painful journey back to each other. The road ahead wouldn't be without challenges, but they would face them together, as a family the way they should have all along. The community center stood proudly in downtown Riverdale, a perfect blend of historical preservation and modern design. The Victorian facade had been lovingly restored, while the interior featured open, flexible spaces for classes, exhibitions, and community gatherings. Mason stood in the main hall, studying the plaque that had been installed that morning. The Ellis Blake Community Center, dedicated to building spaces where families grow. "Dad, you're going to be late." He turned to find Noah, now in his early 20s, home from graduate school in architecture, standing in the doorway with an amused expression. "Your wife sent me to find you," Noah continued. "She said, and I quote, 'Tell your father that reminiscing is wonderful, but we have a ceremony to attend.'" Mason smiled. 3 years ago, he and Nora had finally made it official with a small ceremony in the very community center they'd designed together. The building had become the symbol of everything they'd built from the ruins of what had been. They'd created something beautiful and lasting. "Is Cora ready?" Mason asked as they walked toward the auditorium. "Of course not. When is she ever ready on time?" Noah's affection for his sister was evident despite the complaint. "But she's close. The twins are helping her." The twins, Maya and Lucas, now 5 years old, children of Mason and Nora's renewed relationship. Noah and Cora had been overjoyed when they learned they were going to be siblings again. The age gap was significant, but it seemed to make them even more devoted to their younger brother and sister. The auditorium was filling with people from throughout Riverdale. Today's ceremony would dedicate the new community arts program, fully funded, accessible to all residents regardless of income. It was Nora's dream realized, supported by Mason's resources, but built on her vision. Backstage, Mason found his wife putting finishing touches on her speech. At over 40 years old, Nora was even more beautiful than she'd been when they first met. Life had etched lines on her face, but they were lines of laughter and determination, of challenges met and overcome. "There you are," she said, smiling, "ready to face the masses. With you, always." Cora rushed in, her dress slightly askew, trailed by Maya and Lucas, who were chattering excitedly. Sorry, Cora said breathlessly. "The twins wanted to show me their art projects one more time." At 22, Cora was in medical school, specializing in marine biology and environmental health. She still had that boundless energy, that passionate commitment to making the world better. "We're all here," Nora said, gathering her family with a look. "That's what matters." They took their places on stage as the ceremony began. Mason sat beside Nora. Their children arranged around them, Noah serious and thoughtful, Cora vibrant and animated, and the twins squirming with barely contained excitement. As Nora spoke about community, about second chances, about building spaces where families could grow and thrive, Mason reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He had designed buildings that scraped the sky. He had won awards and achieved global recognition, but none of it compared to what he'd built here. A family, a home, a life rich with meaning and love. After the ceremony, as they mingled with community members, the twins ran up with grass-stained knees and demanding ice cream. "Can we, Dad? Please," Lucas begged. "Mom said to ask you," Maya added with the manipulative genius of a 5-year-old. Mason looked at Nora, who shrugged with a smile. "I said it was up to Dad." "I suppose we can make a quick stop," Mason said, earning squeals of delight. As the family walked toward the ice cream shop, twins racing ahead, Cora and Noah engaged in animated discussion. Nora's hand, in his Mason, realized this was his greatest achievement. Not a building or a project, but this. Love rebuilt, trust restored, family created and recreated through patience and commitment. He had learned that the most important structures aren't made of steel and glass. They're made of moments ordinary and extraordinary, painful and joyful, missed and recovered. They're built one day at a time, with care and attention, and the understanding that the best things in life require both vision and the willingness to adapt that vision to accommodate what truly matters. As they entered the ice cream shop, Mason caught Nora's eye. She smiled that warm, knowing smile that said she understood exactly what he was feeling. They had built something extraordinary together. Not just the community center or the family, but proof that broken things could be made whole. That second chances, when honored with dedication and love, could create something even more beautiful than what had been lost. And in that moment, surrounded by his children's laughter and his wife's love, Mason Blake knew he had finally built his masterpiece.